Okay, we're going to call the Wednesday, April 6, 2022 Board of Education meeting back to order. Everyone, please silence your electronic devices and we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Additions and deletions to the agenda since Friday mailing.
Oh, yeah. Okay, business considerations. I just have a correction to one of my election inspectors on 6.16, the attachment. 6.22 will be added for the Rhinebeck architect. Personnel considerations, there'll be a correction to 7.22 and 7.23, I'm sorry. We'll be adding a 10-year probationary appointment extension. We'll be adding a two science teachers and 2 elementary teachers, and they'll all be reflected in my minutes.
Okay, thank you. Can we get a motion for the additions? Mrs. Burns, Mr. Hislop, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Can I get a motion for the acceptance of the minutes of the March 16, 2022 BOE meeting? Mr. Hislop, Mrs. Burns, all in favor? Aye. And we have a presentation for the budget updates.
Just as a reminder to anybody who's in the audience tonight, the budget presentations are on the counter there if you didn't grab one when you came in. So I'm going to give a quick presentation on program, and then Joanne will follow up with a summary of where we are to date. One important thing to note is that as I talk about program tonight, it's a consolidation of the work that the leaders have been doing over the last basically 4 months to get to this point. And a lot of it's been responsive to the discussions that we've been having as we've moved along the pathway as our budget development. You'll also see that there's kind of an amalgam of monies surrounding the ESSER funds, the school recovery money that the federal government has given schools in New York State, and some money from general fund. And I'll specify, as we talk about positions, which ones are which. So I will specifically call out those that are paid for with funds from the grant. I will also try and specify that if we are paying for a position from the grant and we intend to continue that position, it'll usually say year 1 after it, meaning that we would pay for it in the first year in the grant money, and then when we move into the 23-24 budget season, we would have to consider how to move it into the general fund. So as we go along, if you have questions about that, please feel free to ask me. So we know over the past 4 years, we've talked a lot about enrollment, enlistment, and employment for our students, and we continue to try and center our budget development around those concepts. And as far as the considerations and priorities for all 3 buildings, we identified 5 core areas based on the data that we've experienced. And really, because schools have been in this bizarre standstill move forward over the last 2.5 years, the data is sometimes surprising and startling, and sometimes it's missing because we haven't been able to do some of the things that we ordinarily would be able to do. So as highlights, there's no question that COVID, beyond the scope of quarantines and exclusions from school, attendance has been a hot mess. And I'll talk about some data actually on the next slide about absenteeism in our buildings over the last year. And this is, hypothetically, this is our era of recovery. September to March of this year is a recovery phase. We're back in school full time. Social emotional needs of kids and discipline integrally linked, and we've seen some very startling and strong social emotional behaviors, related behaviors that have come out that is definitely sometimes interfering with instruction in schools. We know there's wide gaps in abilities between our highest and our lowest learners right now. We have a lot of students who are receiving Tier 2 and 3 intervention. Tier 1 intervention is classroom teaching, and then beyond that, it's types of remediation that we do. And the benchmark is always you want at least 85% of your students to be hitting grade level expectations, and we're not there right now. Many schools are not right there right now. And that's why the ESSER money has been put in play to try and close those gaps. Meaningful connections with families, and that would, of course, help to improve academics, attendance and behavior. And then lastly, continuing our pursuit of career and technical education. So the next slide talks about attendance, and on the left side is cumulative attendance numbers. This is exclusive of quarantine. So on the left side it says cumulative days of absence. This is slide 4. And you can see by building what that looks like. And we chose 18-19 because it is a full pre-pandemic year, and it only includes September through March, because we wanted to do like to like. So it's September to March 18-19 to September to March 21-22. And you can see the increase in absenteeism. And when you go to the right side, it talks about absent days per child. And it's adjusted because, of course, student populations were different in the buildings between 18-19 and 21-22. And of course, this is average. So like, I have a son in school, he's in Peter B. His average would be 8.8 this year. Obviously, we have some students who have 40, 50, and 60 absences, and we have some students with none. So, and one of the other pieces of data I could have shown was the chronic absenteeism. And Carol was working on that today, and she noted the chronic absenteeism is mind-altering. And we know that absenteeism leads to failing grades, leads to dropout, and these past 3 years have unquestionably been problems for dropouts. Do you have any questions about the attendance?
Brian, what type of things did we do this year in response to absenteeism? What kind of response did we have as a district? Was it just phone calls? Was it visits? Was it, how did we handle that as a policy?
It's basically the same strategies we would have used pre-pandemic, which is teacher intervention first, emails and phone calls, then counselors, social workers to meet with the children if they, it appears as though it's something related to that has to help them to it. Parent meetings with the principal intervention as well, having the parents come in and meeting as a team. And in talking to the high school team, some of the more disappointing things for them has been not being able to get a family to come in at all. That because of having to learn virtually 2 years ago, choosing some mixed mode or learning virtually last year, that they just didn't even see the reason of coming in. So we're not even starting from zero. We're starting from negative something, and they're not being able to jumpstart it in a meaningful way. We haven't thought of anything that's truly different about how to address it. And our actually board policy speaks to the consequences for being absent. We would have kicked dozens and dozens and dozens of kids out of school for absenteeism at this point, based on those policies, and they need to be restarted in a meaningful way. People have forgotten how to come to school in some instances. On the next page, the next few slides focus specifically on elementary school. And this is not a commentary on our elementary teachers. This is a commentary on the gaps that we're talking about. We're using FastBridge as a benchmarking tool for English language arts and math. And the benchmarks happen a few times during the year. They happen in the fall, the winter, and we have one I think may have just been done. Between fall and winter of this year, you can see those students who were not making appropriate or expected growth was nearly half of those kiddos who sat for those assessments. Obviously, our teachers in the classrooms have adapted their instruction to try to meet those needs, but when we talk about remediation at tier 2 and 3, that means teachers spending extra time with a child, or a reading specialist or a math specialist, or even moving to a special ed designation. This overwhelms any other system that we have. There's no way to give enough support to half of the kids. So we know that is an ongoing issue. Mr. Engelhardt mentioned as the reports come in for the spring, these numbers look better, which is a plus. And they should continue to be better. And we are in the planning stages for our summer program. We expect that type of enrichment to continue to help kids close the gap around these types of things. And on the next slide, it talks about some of the disciplinary negative referrals that we've had. Just chose 4 areas, and as you'd imagine, elementary school has a little bit more limited scope in the types of things. What's omitted from here is, some of the things you may see more commonly at the high school, although I will say there are some things that have appeared, as I mentioned, in behaviors at the elementary that have never been there before, or never been there with this magnitude. So the left side is pre-pandemic numbers, and the right side is from this year. Again, it's only from September to March. And you can see the increases in the types of referrals within the elementary school. And what that does is, of course, I use the analogy at the high school, you got a toolbox. You have a toolbox full of things that you can use when a child misbehaves. You could put them in lunch detention, you could have them stay for regular detention, 10th period, you could stay for extended detention, you can put them in school, and you can suspend them. You can counsel them up front too, I skipped that one. And the middle school is essentially the same. At the elementary school, when there is a disciplinary issue, the principal spends 10 minutes, a half hour, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, with the help of school counselors and social workers and the office staff, trying to keep a child together who is in crisis or has fallen apart or done something egregious. It is different than middle school and high school as far as how they're able to cope with that. And as I mentioned, this is different than calling a friend a name, you're a jerk or you're stupid. Some of the things that are happening at elementary schools across the country are startling. And it is very time consuming for our principals. So therefore, again, taking them away from improving our instruction.
Brian, I don't want to minimize this because the percentages
Yeah.
are jarring, but do you think they're the raw numbers? Because it would make a difference in my mind of what this chart tells me.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 5 and it went to 7, percentage-wise, it might mean one thing, but number-wise, it may not be as significant. And I'm not minimizing the data.
I can talk to you about in scope and generalities. Defiance, insubordination, and noncompliance in both the buildings is in the low numbers, like sub 10 pre-pandemic, and then in the 20s for post-pandemic. Disrespect, the same, is another one where it's traditionally pretty low. You're talking 10 to 12, and then now turning in numbers in the 20s. Physical aggression and fighting is the most startling one because it's weird that students are expressing themselves. That was the first article that came out when schools returned to in-person instruction, that students who hadn't been socialized were like attacking staff. I'm not saying our kids are attacking staff, but students across the country kicking teachers, punching teachers, pulling their hair because they just had no idea how to be in the presence of that. Physical aggression is usually a number in the high teens and low 20s and has moved into the 30s and 40s. And abusive language and profanity. I had Debbie tell me 2 things today she's never even seen kids do before in her life that kids are doing this year. So there were very low numbers at Becker, again in the 10s to 20s, and now it's just explosive.
Brian, have we seen any kind of uptick in our other schools, like secondary schools, like middle school, high school, with discipline, like some of these same issues? Has it been consistent? Have we seen more? I know we're coming out of kind of a pandemic and it's different, but I mean, have we seen any kind of uptick from maybe 2-3 years ago when we had full students?
Secondary students have a whole different spectrum of reaction. We see a lot of school avoidance. The attendance issues that we're talking about, they're choosing not to come, which is helpful because if they're going to come and be a problem, they certainly will be. Interestingly, because, and I'm talking, my 1 semester of psychology, the middle school and high school kids, or at least the high school kids, had almost a lifetime of socialization and understanding how to conduct themselves. And although there are unquestionably the same social emotional outbursts, they're doing it a little differently than what's happening at elementary. We see some really severe things. We've seen some students fighting, lots of verbal stuff happening, but not in such a greater number than we have in the past. What I was going to say is, it's like the high schoolers are coming out of their shell slower because they they were more accustomed to how the process of school worked. So not a drastic number, but when things are happening, unquestionably the social emotional health of all of our students in every building is in a tough place. That part they haven't mitigated well. So as far as program, we know that elementary principals need to be instructional leaders in the buildings. That's what they're hired to do. And the discipline issues that have happened have hampered that. We have one social worker in each elementary school right now, and the complexity that's occurred it makes us think through how we meet the needs of students right now as we're coming out of the pandemic. And we have some increased enrollment at Peter B. So as part of the other piece we talked about with instruction, to improve instruction, we want to partner with BOCES to have an instructional coach. That person will also work with middle school, again on that tier 1 instruction to improve the initial instruction for students. And we need to create systems where we're sure that we're using technology in a transformative way, that we are circulating books at the elementary. That's something that we've heard as a need, that because of changes in schedule and changes in staffing, they haven't had that. And continuing our CTE work at the elementary, middle, and high school. So what we are proposing to do is adding a teacher at Peter B to help reduce class numbers. We specifically targeted 4th grade because in both of our buildings we see, as we get to the upper grades, we usually reduce a section down to 3. And the class sizes right now are in such a place, and the current scores, that gap of students is great enough that we're interested in investing in a teacher in that classroom. And this is one of those positions where we want to look into the following year to determine whether we want to roll it into the general fund. So it'll be paid with ESSER money. The BOCES instructional coach is aidable. We'd like to hire an assistant principal, which would work half-time in each building to help mitigate the significance of these disciplinary issues that are happening. And their work will really be threefold. It'll be about discipline, but it'll also be allowing the principals to be the instructional leaders they're supposed to. But the relationship with families has been broken in these last 2 or 3 years. Not purposefully, but we've all been kind of in reclusion. And as I'll talk about with middle and high school, we think that being able to be more aggressive, not the right word, more progressive about how we intentionally build relationships with families, that we can break the tide of attendance, discipline, and academics. And lastly, we are implementing multi-tiered systems of support at every level, and an assistant principal would make it possible for our principals to be a part of that team. They act together with teachers, the guidance counselor, social worker, and psychologist to ensure that we're giving the students exactly what they need. That person can also conduct evaluations, teacher evaluations. We currently have one full-time librarian and one part-time librarian in the district. Over the years, we've reduced those positions. We'd like to reinstate one librarian position that would help with the circulation of books and also support the work we're intending to do in our classrooms around employment, enlistment, and enrollment, and definitely ensure that we're circulating our books in the elementary school. And lastly, combined with the middle school, we wanted to add a social worker with the ESSER monies that would be split half-time with the elementary schools and half-time at the middle school. The librarian position would be paid for with the ESSER funds in this coming year, and that's one that we would need to consider rolling into the general fund next year. And we'll determine, we already do have one social worker through our ESSER monies this year, and we'll consider what we want to do going into 23-24, but what we've heard from our counselors is it's not enough. They, either the regularly scheduled meetings they have with students or those incidental events that occur, there is just not enough human capacity in social work right now. And social workers are very hard to find. That's the other, magic piece of that. Do you have any questions about the elementary school? Okay. This is a Slide 11 is just a quick reminder of our 5 priorities. That's the last time that I'll show that slide to you. Because as we go into the middle school and high school, they're essentially addressing the same 5 items. So there's the other half of the social work support I talked about for the middle school. They currently have 1.5 social workers, and they'd like to add 0.5, which will be shared with the elementary, paid for with ESSER funds this year. We have currently have a career and technical certified teacher on staff whose specialization is criminal justice, and what we'd like to do is move that person into a probationary position. Right now he's working as an itinerant, year to year. Move him into as instructional support, but actually into the field. And what that would do is it would actually allow our middle school students to have access to another elective, reduce their time in study halls. And what we'd like to do is extend this type of program into coursework in the high school as well. Not necessarily a full career in the criminal justice program. They do offer that at BOCES right now. But criminal justice coursework, we have quite a few students who've gone into different areas of policing, fire department, emergency response. I do think it's something that would be useful to our communities, whether or not they choose to go into it as a livelihood. And that'll be paid for with ESSER funds in the first year, and we would consider moving that into the budget for 23-24. Again, the instructional coach from BOCES to help with instruction at the middle school level, so they would be working at middle school and elementary, and that's refundable or aidable in the following year. Middle school would benefit from the librarian, and I talked about the benefits of what would happen with an assistant principal at the elementary as far as building relationships with the community. We want to dedicate these grant funds, which, the theme of the grant funds is it's supposed to close the gap. Things that were missed or lost during the pandemic. This is exactly the type of thing the money is intended to do. So what a coordinator would do is they would focus specifically on students with chronic attendance issues and truancy, build relationships with those families, participate in the multi-tiered systems of support around these students. And in all honesty, they may also assist with discipline because they will have essentially what is a caseload. They'll have a group of students that they'll be working with on a regular basis, and those that we identify at risk of not graduating. It's a 1-year position at this time. And we don't know, what we may want to do in the future, but the recovery may be swift or the recovery may be much longer. And we heard all the predictions about that. What questions do you have about the middle school?
Who would the school family coordinator report to? Like, what would be their line of?
First report to the principal, and then they'd report to Fred.
Okay.
We'll talk about it again in the context of the high school. So, all right, high school. The high school has been meeting with CNI and talking about some additional courses that will be offered next year. And we're pleased the work that our work-based learning coordinator has done, along with Lisa and Herb and other staff in the high school, in gaining access to some new pathways. The New York State is catching up, I think, with some of the things that we believe are realistic for our kids. They need to graduate with the basic skills and knowledge around math, science, social studies, and all of the other coursework we do, but the application of it is really crucial. So we already have the pathway Seal of Biliteracy. That was Lisa Barbarino work on that, and Sharon a little bit too. So we've had that for almost 2 years now. That's an example. So when a student graduates, they actually get a special designation on their diploma. The first one that we are seeking to do in 22-23 is the Business Management and Entrepreneurship CTE pathway. And we will be able to do that with existing staff. We want to continue to expand our CTE offerings and other pathways. So although I say there's no cost in 22-23, we know that there will be cost as we go into 23-24, 24-25, we will need to hire or create our own specialized staff to continue to teach the more rigorous coursework involved in some of the other pathways. As for instance, we're talking about human services pathway, which covers a lot of ground. There are a lot of directions for a child to go in, but you need additional fax teachers to do that work. Fax teacher is another one that's a unicorn, but there's the capacity to make some of those people. So as we go into 23-24 and the years after that, we very well may have additions to our staffing in order to meet the needs of those new courses. Again, there's the school family coordinator, someone who will be uniquely dedicated to those kids who are falling through the cracks or have fallen through their cracks. I'm not going to quote to you what I believe our graduation rate is going to be this year. It is not good. We have lost students along the way these past 2.5 years. And there's students who won't ever have the opportunity, this high school opportunity again. And there are a lot of kids who are a mess. So we are interested in dedicating attention toward them. And do you want to say something, Teddy?
Well, no, I mean, I see we put these things in, we go through these programs, it just keeps coming through my mind. We have this discussion every year, and we put a lot of assets towards helping a limited number of people, or a limited number of students. So what I'm saying is, we're some of these things that we're trying to work on affect about 20% maybe of our, student population. And I just want to make sure as we look at considerations for our schools is the other 70% of the kids that don't need some of these services, and what are we doing to make our program better for those students? And one of the, these are things that we have to look at, I think, every single year, and I'm not sure it's really a budget discussion, but something that we have to have discussions about going into a new year, or what we need to do better. I mean, we always have to get better. We have a lot of things in here that will make us better as a school district. But I think as, a program, what are those things we need to look at? Because I think, we get a lot of students that are that average student, that those aren't the people we're focusing on, but we need to make the average student a better student. We need to always make our students better. And every year we come to the budgets and we have discussions about, the kids that are falling off, the graduation numbers and everything else.
Yep.
Yes, we do need to focus on those, but we have a lot of other students that I want to make sure we're focusing on some of those things as well. So I just like to bring it up and keep it,
yeah. Last week, what we would have done, this is the very pared down version. The board had asked that we are really speaking about things that would have an impact on the budget as we go into next year. This is, all these things have impact on budget and staffing, but with the grant money, many of them don't have an impact on our budget for this year. What we would have heard if we had last week, each of the building leaders was going to present, and they were going to give a much broader picture of that.
Right, of some of those things.
What we decided is that what we would do sometime between now and the spring, because the whole process that we're going to do was a snapshot of where we had just come from, what we had promised we would do, where we are today, and where we want to be, and that will be inclusive of the things you've talked about.
Good.
So,
Okay.
The other thing that we had talked about, and I don't know if we're implementing it, but like the real life skills, basic classes,
Yep.
so real life skills, how to balance a checkbook, how to,
Yeah.
those kinds of things would be helpful, I think, to a lot of students.
I agree. We had a little bit of a conversation in that new CTE program and process yesterday. That comes up a lot about interviewing and
Right.
talking to people
Correct.
and how to present yourself. And it's not just in that program that they're looking to do some of those
Right.
things, but even on a larger scale.
I'll give you the snapshot, since we really pared down and redacted this. And this is the most exciting thing. I mean, you're right. You and the board, you sit here, we talk about crisis and issues and the things that are most challenging for us. So this is the dream, which is great. So the 4 courses next year are Intro to Business, AP 2D Art and Design, Basic Electronics, and Graphic Design. Those are the courses that were this year, excuse me. Next year, Intro to Marketing, Computer-Aided Drafting and Design, General Ed Exploration Program. And then for 23-24, Criminal Justice 1 and 2, Firefighter, life skills courses for freshmen and seniors, which is what you're just talking about,
Yeah.
Tracy. First aid and CPR for all of our students, life skill, which we know is also a mandate. So what we keep doing is we grow a branch, and then we grow more branches off of it. And the work that, coming out of the pandemic, the work that has happened around business and career here has been really, it's the first movement we've really seen. We've talked about it for 4 years, and we're starting to actually see it on the horizon, and being able to dedicate resources to it. So they're thinking ahead at exactly what you're talking about. And the last thing on the list is Administrative Director of Athletics, PE, Health, and Wellness. And what that means is a person who would oversee the athletic program, which here at RCS is, at any given year, it's 30-plus teams, 500 to 600 students each year. There's more information on the next slide, actually, on slide number too small to read, 13. New York State requires that schools employ a PE supervisor who is administrative certified. It's difficult. That is a difficult position to fill. We haven't had that in many years, but we have formally had someone in that role before. An administrative AD would be able to formally evaluate chaperones, coaches, and the instructional staff involved in these programs, and have oversight over the health office personnel and provide a significantly better connection between the clearance of students and the requirements that are needed, both with the moving up, the challenging of the teams, a younger student being able to play up, and the day-to-day stuff. I will tell you, having been a high school principal and then an assistant superintendent and then a superintendent, the process of getting students onboarded between August and September is like trying to, move an Army battalion across a river. It is significant, and the collaboration needs to be excellent in that.
Are the formal evaluations of chaperones, coaches, and instructional staff, is that required by New York State?
No. And I put chaperones in there because we talk about the fidelity of our facilities. We hire chaperones for every event, both inside and outside our buildings, home and away when we can. And chaperoning is more than just signing up. It has a responsibility in that. So I don't know that we were formally assessed that. We talk a lot about who allowed that to happen, and I'm not disrespecting the chaperones. Our chaperones volunteering their time for not a lot of pay to do this work. But I think anticipating and expecting a level of consistency and quality in it is very important. What was the second part, Pete?
Well, my question was the New York State required, and have we been doing this?
The instructional staff have been evaluated by principals or assistant principals to this point, because we don't have someone in a position to do it elsewhere.
What have coaches been getting?
Coaches have been evaluated by an athletic director who's in the teacher unit, who's a peer.
Isn't that a little bit of a conflict there?
It is. It could be.
Okay.
I think that
for me, it would be awkward to have somebody in my unit, giving me an evaluation, and I think
we've done it with some levels of success. But yeah, there is, of course, there's the potential for it to be difficult or awkward. Agreed.
I think the other thing is this person is usually very involved with a lot of community organizations. This role takes a lot of time dealing with the basketball league, the soccer club, the youth football league, the youth little league. This has always been our main contact with using our facilities, which these organizations are ultimately RCS kids that end up playing in our program. They're more elementary schools. So I think that's another important part of this role, is they're very involved in the community and knowing the people within the community and working. So I think it's an important position. And we've done a really good job, but it's very time consuming.
It is extremely time consuming. communications with the section and the council are very difficult as well. The other piece that we had conceptualized is, we want just like we want our facilities and our instructional program to be a flagship, our athletic programs are very front-facing. There be a partnership with our communications person, that we are providing a steady stream of successes of our kids on the field, in the classroom, in the workplace. That's an essential piece of it. And we're in a world now where people want that type of content almost instantaneously. It's to a detriment sometimes, but there's certainly a huge benefit to having someone who's dedicated full-time and is simply focused on how do we promote program in a way that improves students' lives. There's lots of research on, of course, students involved in athletics and how they succeed in other parts of their lives, but having someone who's uniquely focused on doing that work.
Brian, is there clerical support for the AD for that department, or is it?
Not currently.
Okay. We had it in the past though, right? At least part-time?
I've been here 12 years, maybe, but I don't remember who it might have been. Sometimes the building secretary at the high school might have assisted with that, but I can't remember that they were assigned to do that work. So of all the things that I discussed in there, and Joanne has it inclusive of the budget that we're going to discuss next, there is no imminent expense for the budget for next year other than the two leadership positions, the athletic director and the assistant principal at the elementary. All the rest of those positions will be funded through the ESSER monies, and some of them with the expectation that we want to move forward, and we'll have to consider how they become a part of next year's budget.
Okay, great. Now we're going to talk about how we're going to, the overall budget expenditures. So right now we're looking at a $51,256,929 versus $48 million. The difference we're increasing our budget right now is $2.6 million or 5.39%. What this allows for is it allows for the settlement of one of our largest bargaining units and makes assumptions for 3 other bargaining units that are currently not settled and expire this coming June. We've already spoken about general support, debt service. We're still going to go through those again this evening. We've also talked about transportation. We were slated to talk about O&M last week, but we're going to touch base on O&M and the rest of the departments this evening to give you an overview. Operations and maintenance. I do have Mr. Schramm here if anybody has any questions, but we're going to touch base on operations and maintenance. Right now, the current increase in those codes which are responsible for our facilities, both inside and out, the increase is $331,994, or 9.9%. And what it does, it allows for increase in upkeep and repairs. We have more square footage, more area, both inside and out. With that comes the responsibility to make sure that we can maintain those facilities, keep them clean, well-built, maintain when there's a repair needed. Additional equipment that should be contractual and equipment rentals. One of the things we've done over the last year is increase our rentals for equipment for snow removal, grounds, what we need to do. It allows us to offset and not have those big expenditures as far as buying big pieces of equipment when we only need these larger pieces of equipment for a smaller period of time. And I'm giving you approximate increases on those. We've had, this budget year is a little bit different because we have some unknowns that are going to make it a little bit challenging. We've all suffered increases with fuel, our home heating fuel, the fuel that we need to power our vehicles. So we have to make some assumptions there for the increases in natural gas, electricity, fuel, all of those things. Material and supplies, again, is up about $24,000 to what I just spoke with. We have increased our size, our square footage inside and out. We still want to maintain the cleaning protocols that we have done through COVID, and we're going to continue to do that. One of the other factors which make it unknown are the supply chain demands as well as inflation factors. Everything's going up. We hear about it on the TV. We are suffering through it with our own pocketbooks. Prices are going up. So, and again, it's an unknown. It's hard to put a finger on exactly what it's going to be. I wanted to give you an idea of some of the things we've accomplished this year. You can see some of the middle school at the bottom of this page, just a picture of the the new learning spaces, we've done the outside lights, we have a irrigation system at Peter B. And I would think everybody would agree that the Peter B. fields look tremendous, how they looked compared to about 4 years ago, so they look great.
Joanne, didn't we have a discussion one time about tarps for our field? Didn't we have a local business, we were gonna buy like tarps for like the pitcher's mound and home plate and like for our softball fields, the baseball fields? Like just because it rains like every other day here and it might help the grounds crew with
Oh.
keeping them dry?
I
Just like something just for the pitcher's mound usually and then another one?
We have the baseball field for the pitch mound for home plate.
Right, we do have 'em? I remember somebody, I thought somebody was going to,
The softball fields, just due to the size of those, are very difficult.
right, yeah, yeah. I was
But
just
I-
curious.
And they took, the grounds people and the facilities people took very good care of those fields over the winter time. So
Yeah,
I
they
think
were
you can
tarps
immediately see the
during the
difference
winter.
this year as opposed to previous years.
Yeah, good.
Then we're gonna talk about the general support. That's an increase of 10.31% or $532,000. And I want you to know that it includes the superintendent's office, the business office, tax collection, treasurer, finances, everything. I want to give you an idea of what some of those increases are. We are increasing the district office staff. I talk often about wanting to retire or desire as I get older. This will help us position ourselves in a better place. As we talk about often with the CARES Act and the transparency report, the reporting requirements that we are required to do as a district are becoming overwhelming, especially with the ESSER money, the ARP money. We need more staff, and so this is going to help us and position us for me to retire at some point in the future.
I think having a 5-year plan is great.
That's
Thank
a
you.
great idea, okay. So let's just keep going on the important stuff here. It meets contractual obligations for all the staff. It reflects increases for fuel, electricity, other inflationary factors. Again, it's a continued commitment to facilities upkeep. Again, it's that 532 also includes O&M. I want to be clear about that. That's all of us and O&M. It also allows, we've talked about possibility of putting up a referendum this fall, winter. It allows for the expense that goes along with that. And what I will say, if we did put a project up and it was approved, we can reimburse the general fund, but if it wasn't approved, it would be an expense to the district. And again, BOCES was going to increase the tax collection fee over double the cost for their tax collection services, which we have no guarantee that they'll be done efficiently, on time. We've experienced problems 2 years in a row, tax bills going out late, and they're just overall inability to keep up with the number of bills they have. They do a lot of school districts. They suffered the same thing that we're suffering through, is trying to find and hire and retain staff. So we've put in an increase for that so we can do our own tax processing in-house this year. We used to do it the year before I started. It was the last year we did it, but we're going to do it again. We feel we'll have better control over that, so the taxpayers, very often this past year, people were waiting 3 weeks or more to see their tax payments credited to their accounts. Do we know it's going to be a lot of work? Yes, we do. Also in this budget, you're going to see, well, I was going to talk about it later, we are going to an e-sign process with voters. We're state of the art. You're no more of the books that we're going to have. It's all electronic. It's going to put us at a moment's notice when somebody comes in and says, how many people have voted? We're going to be able to tell them how many people, what their age bracket is, female or male. So we're looking forward to that this year. The next piece you're going to see is the program. And by program, I mean anything that has to do with the instructional program, whether it be regular instruction, students with disabilities, social work, psychologists, that's everything. It's your administrators in the buildings. That's up 3.93% or just over $1 million. And again, salaries alone are up just over $1 million, just $1,002,896. Again, we kind of knew that. We just settled a contract. It also includes additional administrators. I hadn't made this change. It's 2 administrators. The instructional positions are going to be through the CARES Act. It reflects the contract settlements as well as some assumptions for the expired bargaining units this coming June.
Are we losing any instructional positions? Would that
No.
be here?
Yes, and we are not losing
Okay.
any. Nope.
That's a good thing.
Equipment and furniture is up just about $29,000. Contractual expenditures overall are down a small amount, $66,000. And what's important to note that material and supplies has increased, 13.73% or 66,000. And I would like you to know what that entails. More money for the STEAM departments. The teachers have indicated to us that they need more supplies. They need to do these projects. With that comes money. It's the CDOS. The Career Cafe is going to be a little bit more money for their supplies. General classroom supplies will go up. We've already started that. We've rolled over the system to start in processing so we can submit our orders for supplies. What month are we in now? April and May. So we'll have them.
So that we don't run into the supply issue that we ran into in the fall, we are ahead of the game.
We are ahead of the game right now, yes, but I can't tell you that if there's a supply
Fair
chain
enough.
problem that we're going to have it, but we anticipate everything going in 2 months ahead of time, what we've done last year, so we do anticipate a much better turnaround for
And do we
supplies.
have a communication plan for teachers that don't have the supplies they need when the year starts?
Yeah, we have
a-
worked on that this year. Sue Harrison has gone out of her way to work with everybody. We've met with CCSs, we'll continue to do that. We're also coming up with a plan for the receiving of those products over the summer. And how are those products and supplies that we get gonna be delivered to the individual buildings?
Perfect.
We're gonna be checking them in, getting them delivered. Now, we haven't finalized that, whether they'll go to the building secretary for storage in one place, but we will know that those goods get there. We get the paperwork that we need to document that things were received, sealed back up, sent to the teachers, so things will be, knock wood, or whatever this material is, that it goes better.
Very good.
Transportation, we talked about earlier in the season, benefits and debt service. You know, transportation's, again, a large area for one of the bargaining units that's still under negotiations and hasn't settled yet. We also know that we have to become more competitive in what we're paying our drivers to meet where other districts in our area are paying. Again, it's an estimate. You have to make some assumptions. Again, we had to make some large assumptions for fuel costs, diesel. Propane seems to be the only one that's not going through the roof. I'll knock wood again on that. Benefit increases is a small increase, and then debt service is a $670,000 increase. That's due to the fact that we're going to be doing the final permanent financing for the big project that we did. We had been banning that, which is called a bond anticipation note. It's short-term borrowing that we renew every year, along with a permanent financing. Becomes a little bit more expensive. There costs more for what you have to disclose, and the prep to borrow those funds is a little bit different. Now, how are we going to pay for it? I think that's important. Everybody wants to know how we're going to pay for that. This particular revenue structure does include a 2% tax levy increase. We have that conversation every year on exactly what does that mean, the tax cap limit. I'll go through that. It's in another slide in this show. Our current limit is 4.94. We're going to go with a 2%, which represents $521,000 new dollars. And most of the revenue that we spoke about earlier this season remains the same. The pilots, which are payments in lieu of taxes. Very often businesses get tax credits, so they don't have to pay the taxes on their full assessment. They're just payments in lieu of taxes. Local revenues would be continuing ed, things like that. It's a very small amount of money. Foundation aid, we know that that's slated to, it was an increase of $363, and we're supposed to get an increase next year. Again, BOCES aid, we continue to increase our services with BOCE, which does have its, we get more aid on that. And pretty much everything is the same, except you get down to the bottom. You're going to see a $2.763,563 in fund balance. One of the things that the pandemic has done is we haven't spent as much money, which means we had extra money left over, so we're going to put that back to help balance the budget. And a little bit of reserve is about $130,000 in an unemployment reserve that the auditors most certainly would make us reduce anyway. So that's how we're going to balance that budget. Now, here's an important slide because it tells the homeowner what they might expect for a tax bill increase on a home that's worth $150,000. Last year's rate compared to the projected rate with a 2% increase, would be anywhere from $58 in Bethlehem, $54 in Ravena. Then there's New Scotland, I don't know what order these are in, but it goes from $58, that's their annual increase. 54, 59, and 82 is your Greene County School, the new Baltimore school. I want you to know that, again, the tax cap calculation would allow us, if we needed, to increase the tax levy. And by levy, I mean the actual dollars. We could go up as high as 5.94%. And these figures are true if our assessments remain the same. But keep in mind, with our assessments, if our assessments go up, your tax levy will go, your rate of what you pay will go down. If our tax assessments or assessments on our properties go down, well, that increase might go up a little bit. We never know that information until August. It's crazy. But again, if everything were the status quo, your your individual homeowner would be anywhere from $58 up to $82. I wanted to give you an idea of where we've been with the tax cap calculation and the levy increase over the last 4 years. 1920, our calculation, our maximum was 5.59. We went out with 2.75, which got us $698,000 new dollars. We left the tax levy steady for the next 2 years in 2021 and 21-22. And this year for 22-23, we're doing a slight increase in the tax levy of 2%, as well as increasing our assigned fund balance to help us offset the increase in the expenditures. But that just gives you an idea of where it's been. And then fund balance estimates. That fund balance is always a number that's fluid, it's moving. I wanted you all to see where our current fund balance is projected to be. Mind you, I'm not hiding anything. Our unassigned fund balance is higher than what would be allowable. Again, that's due to the pandemic. We are not the only school district in the state that is suffering through having too much money. We are scrutinized by our auditors, by the state of New York, so we have made the budget before you. We'll drop that down at least 4%, possibly a little bit higher. What we don't know right now as far as our fund balance, which the figures that have yet to be determined, are the EBLAR, which means the Employee Benefit Reserve. When our employees leave here, they get a payment to leave. When they leave, they retire. So we're going to make sure that that's funded to set aside for that, as well as any of the future retirees or employees that work here now. It's a calculation that we start now, and we will bring to you changes in probably late May. The capital reserve, I've made assumptions that we're going to put a little bit more money in that. If you remember, the voters approved an increase to that capital reserve for an additional $3 million. We put $1 million in it last year, and this increases it a little bit more. Again, we haven't made that decision yet. I am making some assumptions. The Board of Education will approve those things in May. Your reserve for encumbrances, that's just it's what we carry over from year to year. That figure will change at the close of every year. Your tax tertiary reserve, that may go down. It depends on what we have. We've closed out a lot of them. We dropped it a bit over from 2017. Right now it has 192. I'm not sure where that'll end up yet. Again, I spoke earlier about the $130,000 in reserves. That's going to come from the unemployment reserve. And we're still going to fund TRS. There's a calculation that we do with teacher salaries and what's the most that we can put in that reserve. It's a formula, and we have not finalized that yet. One of the things our voters are going to be asked to do is to fund the repair reserve further by an additional $500,000. And what that means is when we put that referendum up to the voters, if it's approved, we can fund that repair reserve up to $500,000. Remember, to get money out of that repair reserve, it requires a public vote. That's all it does. We have to have a public hearing, not a public vote, excuse me, a public hearing if we wanted to, we came across something that needed to be repaired. A couple meetings ago, we approved an expenditure for an emergency pool filter. That's going to come out of our fund balance, and it gives you an idea that we'll end up about 5% lower than we were last year. But again, it'll probably go down a little bit further than that. And that's just a summary of the fund balance projection of what I just spoke about. We can skip that one. And then what else will the voters be voting on? I feel like we're putting up quite a bit for our voters this year. There's going to be an 8-page newsletter that goes out. It's going to talk about the budget. It's going to talk about the capital projects. It's going to spell out everything that we're asking our community and our voters to do. It'll include a $2.3 million capital project. It's going to utilize $750,000 of that capital reserve. The voters do have to approve spending that reserve. That will allow the district to address some smaller items that were on the building condition survey, so we don't have to wait 2 years to do a capital project. We all know the length of time it takes to do a capital project. The voters are going to be asked for a bus purchase proposition. We spoke about that a few meetings ago. That'll allow us to buy 3 65-passenger buses and 2 smaller buses. One's going to be a 14-passenger activity bus, and one's going to be a 30-passenger. The 14-passenger would be able to be driven by someone that doesn't have a CDL. The 30-passenger would require a CDL with the S&P endorsements. We are, again, I spoke to this a few minutes ago, increase the repair reserve by $500,000. Again, the voters have to approve that. You're going to be voting for 3 Board of Education candidates. Our voters also have to vote on the library budget and the library trustees. A lot to do. We have a huge ballot this year. We're working on it now. We are approving the property tax report card this evening. We will prepare for a public hearing on 5/4, but what's most important to note is that the budget that we are putting up to the voters, you have it. It is just $51 million, just over that. Does anybody have any questions?
No? Thank you. I know it's a lot of hard work
Thank you.
trying to put it all together.
I wanted to note that all the positions that we talked about tonight, all of them that are new positions would require action of the board. And those that, unless they're being paid for with the grant money, none of them could be posted or hired for until after the budget is approved. So what is likely to happen is a few of these positions that we know, because hiring is very timely right now, it's a competitive market, students are coming out of school, staff in some places may be considering moving. If there are some positions here that will be funded by the grant, we may come in the April 27th meeting or the first one in May and ask for the board to create some of these positions for next year that will be paid for with grant money so that we're sure we're capturing the folks that we're most interested in. But any of those that are part of the general fund won't be able to be voted on until after, or sorry, won't be able to be posted and hired and created until after the voters vote on the budget.
Okay. Good. Hearings and petitions for the first session. There we go. Mr. Miller for Budget Development Concerns.
Good evening. I'm going to be speaking tonight with 2 hats on, so hopefully that'll get me 6 minutes instead of 3, but that of a taxpaying citizen and that of the union leader. I've been voting on RCS budgets now for about 30 years and coming to these budget meetings for a good 21 years. I've seen a lot of many different budget iterations, how we do this process, and many times the community has been involved in the actual budget preparation in regard to priorities, as well as to areas to save in times when things were difficult. This process may be the least transparent I believe I've ever seen in regard to what's in the spending plan. I know the board has asked oftentimes for less onerous presentations of non-related issues, of big, what we've done throughout the last year, so they can see what's actually in the budget. And it may be true that both the board and the public actually vote on only a spending amount. But it is standard procedure and usually good practice to share what's included in that spending amount well ahead of time, not the night you're going to vote on it. As a citizen, I may feel like $52 million is a good number to approve, but if you knew that, you say you were going to be eliminating the whole music program, and we're not, but if that was something that was going on, I might feel very likely differently about it, want to be able to speak about it, and would probably vote very differently about that as well. If we approve the budget right away tonight with so little information provided ahead of time, especially when the website says 3 weeks, I think it's a little surreptitious to the community and makes support very tenuous. As a union leader, I'm focused on the information we received from administration that you saw tonight, that the role of athletic director will be removed from the teaching unit and turned into an administrative function. This is disturbing to us on many fronts, not the least of which is that we just came through a protracted and difficult negotiations where this was an item on the table, that this information was never broached during that time. Worse yet, this information began to reach us through students in the high school, through community members that were all fully aware of this already from board members before the administration ever got to speak to us about it and form the union. To us, that's completely inappropriate behavior, even possible grounds for removal in New York State regulations. I'm here to speak again against that change. This is unit work for us. It's an opportunity for advancement, but there's not a lot of chances to do that in education. It's taken away from our members. We have several people in the line that are interested in this position, have worked towards this goal for many years, given a lot to our district. They're qualified, they're local, they have those community connections that we heard about tonight. And to be honest, it's also money out of our members' pockets. It takes away from our people's ability to earn. One of the reasons, probably the only reason given to us about this was about compliance. We need to become compliant. We were compliant for many, many years until actions by administration in June took the certified person that we had and the compliant person out and replaced them with an uncertified person. So creating a compliance issue does not necessarily warrant this kind of reaction to fix it. It's a little self-serving, it's a little disingenuous. The SED regs are clear that you must have a PE certification and an administration degree to be a director of this type of position. But that athletics, while included in those regs, can be removed as a standalone, as we have had in this district for over 30 years. We do not see the compelling reason to make this change. I'd finish by asking the board to not necessarily approve the budget tonight until it's been made much more clear to the community what they're actually voting on, such as increased administration, and they have time to digest it so that their first chance to speak on it is not in the budget vote. It's too important. And we also ask that, though it seems to have originated with the board members, that you also rethink the AD position and not support this change, as we already have significant administration in this district. The extra cost is not worth it, and we should keep it local. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Business considerations, we need a motion.
All the business considerations, 6-1 through 6-22.
Okay, we have a second. Mrs. Hoteling, before we vote on this, I want to just call out the Stewart's Holiday Match Grant. I think we have 4 of them that we would like to thank them for the purchase of books, for the school's literacy closet at Peter B., and also $500 from Stewart's for some laser cutter engraving tools for some other STEAM topics that they're going to use these on. The high school diversity club and the RCS middle school backpack program. So we want to thank Stewart's Shops and their holiday match grant. And that's all of them. Any other discussion on any of these other topics?
I was wondering if we could have a little follow-up, either this meeting or next one, from the risk assessment. It'd be great to pull out a few highlights, anything that we should be drawing out for public discussion or planning in the future. That'd
Yeah,
be
we
great.
can put that in there next meeting. We went through that at the audit meeting last week or the week before. And I'm not sure we've actually decided on the next topic yet, have we? I think we just got a list of things that we'll have to discuss and come out with. We went through the last one. So we'll put that on the agenda, kind of. Perfect, thank you. Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We need a motion for one or all of the business considerations.
I'll make a motion for all, 7-1 through
Oh,
7.
personnel, we did business, sorry.
Sorry, personnel, right?
Yeah,
7-1 through 7-38.
okay. Do we have a second? Mrs. Klein, any discussion? Do you know that we have a lot of 10-year approvals for staff members in the agenda this week? And I want to congratulate all of them and thank them for all of the hard work that they've put in. So I congratulate all of them. And we will celebrate you in the fall. And I don't think we have any retirements, do we? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion's passed. All right. 8 is informational items only. Special reports. We have nothing to discuss. Any other board members want to bring some things up?
Kindergarten screening and when that's gonna be. I've had a few people ask, and I, for one, have a kindergartner next year, so, for this year.
We did post on our, we did post on our website, some of the changes. So, it is on our website and our Facebook page, but to your point, Kristen, we will, maybe do something with those who have already registered. Consider something.
That was the other question. Do people
So-
that have already registered, will they get a phone call? Or
Yep. So pre-K and kindergarten registration ends on April 25th, Monday, April 25th. And then screening will take place similar to last year in the end of May for that. But we will maybe even do a backpack because there's so many siblings as well,
Okay.
just to let people know.
Are they on our signs?
Say that again?
Are they on our signs periodically? The
That's a
digital
good question.
signs?
That's a good idea.
Oh, is the sign working today?
It was off this afternoon when we drove by.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can't get anything by her.
She didn't know what time it was.
Kristen, did you have something else?
Nope, that's it.
Just that?
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything?
I just saw a news report on the Career Cafe. I know it's been a couple weeks out on News Channel 13, how they do it in like the upstate business. It was more of like, it wasn't like, hey, we're a school doing something. It was almost like, here's a business plan that's working. And I know it took place in here. It looked really good. I heard some positive things, and I think that's exactly what we're looking for. It's good to see.
Fred and Joanne saw it live, and they both recounted, oh man, someone else beat us to the punch, I can't believe it. And then they're like, oh.
That's us.
That's us.
Channel 6 came, did footage, interviewed people, didn't show any of it.
No.
13 created all that content from what our communications person put out.
Oh, nice.
It was very complimentary. It was great.
It's very exciting, and I think with the new program that we have that we're coming out with, I think it's really just the start of what we're going to see in the future, because I think there were some exciting things on our Google Classroom, our Google Call yesterday, that the program and some of the things for kids is just going to continue to grow with that. So it's exciting. I will turn it over to Dr. Bailey.
Along those lines, we just finished Music in Our Schools Month. Shelley made sure I got this pin. But what a fantastic series of concerts in our district and at the Plaza. We went down, the Jazz Ensemble and Set Choir performed down there a few weeks ago. And the last of the concerts was last week, the choral 6 through 12, which is great to see the transition of all those kids. In this coming month, we've got our art show starting. I think Peter B's is tomorrow. So we continue our arts in the forefront. We talked a few months ago about tours and what the board policy states around tours. I think the latest update to board policy was 2019 around them, and we talked about there are different levels of trips, school-sponsored trips, independent trips. And we did have an interest meeting for staff at the secondary level, both middle school and high school staff, a few weeks ago with EF Tours, which is a company that's used pretty frequently by schools in the area and has been used here as well. And some of the staff do have interest in traveling abroad with our students. Before we go out to families, and we'd be talking about travel in the spring of 2023. That's the soonest that would happen. Some of the things that we'll be sure to put in place prior to are having our first interest meeting is talking about student safety, equitable access to those trips. What are the educational outcomes that we expect from the trip? Because it's pretty common that they miss a day or two because they might leave on a Friday before April break or come back a Monday after April break. So it's impactful on the rest of the program, ensuring that it has some tie to school. If we have a relationship with this type of program, it has to meet all of our needs. So we do have some interested staff, which is great. And this company is very, I can't remember how many years they've been in business, but and they are used by some neighboring schools. They really tailor around the needs of the organization that's doing the trip. So if we said we wanted to go to Bulgaria, they would figure out how to do that in a manner that meets all of our needs. I know. Not necessarily the first place you would choose, but at any rate, we'll continue to move forward on that, and I'll be meeting with some of the folks that are interested in those trips, along with the secondary leaders, to talk through how we meet our expectations around that.
Did you, sorry, in the beginning, did you say that we made policy changes in 2019?
Yeah, we did some updates to our field trip policies.
When we have that discussion, can you just remind us of what those
Absolutely.
were? Like,
Yeah.
I know, because it always starts a discussion about insurance and liability and
Yeah.
whatever else, so, thanks, that would help me.
Sure.
I think that's exciting. I had two of my three kids do study abroads through associations.
Yeah.
And it was life-changing for them. So the third one was angry that that wasn't an opportunity for him.
The families that I've spoken to who have had that opportunity, they almost all respond the exact same way. They had a totally different worldview when they returned. So we look forward to that for our kids. That's especially now, coming out of something that none of us wanted for them for the past 2 years.
Okay, you good?
Yeah.
Turn it over to Mr. Engelhardt.
So a couple of things exciting coming from our middle school. The end of March, we had a representative from the New York Public Interest Research Group, Kevin Dugan, come and talk about historically marginalized folks and voting rights, especially revolving around February and Black History Month, and then also March and Women's History Month. So we wanted to celebrate that. I mentioned in February how our middle schoolers sent Valentine's Day cards to various service providers. So we did get a really nice letter. Ms. Capiz got a letter from the Firemen's Association of New York, just thanking them for the letters that they sent to the firefighters, the veteran firefighters, the ladies' auxiliary groups, and then their spouses as well. So we want to celebrate that. Mr. Reveley already talked about the Stewart's Holiday Match grants. We have a couple more coming up from there, but we want to celebrate all of those things that those grants are funding. A lot around kind of the makerspace and career cafe ideas, so I'm really excited around some of the STEAM projects. I wanted to just mention that we're finishing up ELA 3-8 testing. We were glad to see an overall increase in our participation historically compared to what we've seen in the past. New York State Ed is asking for feedback regarding the tests. We're seeing it taking a little bit longer than what has happened pre-COVID, and we don't know if it's because the COVID sustainability piece, or I should say COVID has affected sustainability or the ability to really be determined with that. So we're looking forward to at least giving some feedback and getting some response from New York State on what that might look like going forward. I just wanted to kind of follow up on what Teddy was talking about yesterday. We met with Maureen Martin and Ree Pasilico. Ree is our CTE task consultant, so she's really helped us to kind of get all the paperwork needed for this pathway for marketing and entrepreneurship. And we had quite a few people on the call yesterday, teachers, community members. As part of the process, you have to have an advisory group. So this was the first time that the folks got together. There were some really great questions. To Tracy's point, something came up around soft skills and how are we teaching human resource type of skills? What does an interview look like? Part of this pathway is that the employer will have an actual checklist of some of those soft skills. So there's a profile that comes with that. So we're really excited about some of that work. In addition to that, we approved 6.19, which is one of the courses has to be college credit bearing. So we have Columbia Green will be providing credit for one of our courses. And then in addition to what Dr. Bailey talked about with some of our other pathways and SEALs, I wanted to mention and remind us that Shelley, Ms. McLaughlin, has signed us up for the individual arts assessment pathway. We're piloting that at RCS, so it's another one of those like seal of biliteracies. The students, we're looking at students who leave with this distinguished kind of mark, will have something on their diploma that sets them apart. And then also, which is, it's not new, but it came out right before COVID, so they're doing a little bit of reboot, and we're looking into the Seal of Civic Readiness. And so that is really on, if you're thinking of the social studies pathway, but then also all of those volunteerism experiences. And so if students are able to take those courses, demonstrate that they've done these volunteer experiences, they would be able to leave with that as well. And that actually goes down to the middle school. It starts in the middle school with a capstone project, which we've talked about. So a lot of the things that we've talked about over the last couple of years are coming to fruition, the state's recognizing as important. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. And I think that's it.
Great. Mrs. Maria? Yep.
SATs, are they doing them in school again? Did we already do them?
Some just happened,
When?
maybe.
The 26th. 26th.
We're doing them in school, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. During the day, right. Okay.
For what, 11th graders? Right? That's what it is. Good. Mrs. Maria?
We approved a transportation director last meeting, and I'm going to tell you, Mr. Lips is off to a good start. We already are registered as a training facility. We have a little bit of work to do. We are going to focus on recruitment efforts. That has to be where our goal is. But he's working directly with Jason Symington, who is also oversees the mechanics. They're having meetings. We're meeting twice a week. He's a breath of fresh air. He's really embraced Ravena. He's happy to be here. He has family members in the district. We also, again, in addition to working on the budget, another piece of what we do is we negotiate contracts and the board approves them. We have to implement them. I'm happy to report that we're going to do the teachers' contracts in 3 phases. We did the first pay, we got their contracts all together. We'll do the other 2 pieces of it, which are longevity, and then we go back, and if somebody's owed an increase for work that they've done leading up to April, we'll correct that all in the month of April. And I have to give credit to the business office group who, Helena and Sue and Sue Starr, who aren't historically payroll but have been cross-trained and can do it, and they have really done a great job. But it's a busy time of year right now, and we're still, again, short-staffed, but we're managing to get through. I don't have a lot of updates other than it's the budget, it's negotiations, it's everything else, but that's it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Joanne, did we get any viable candidates from the last sign?
We got a couple of bites. We didn't get any viable candidates that ended up coming on board.
Thank you. Anyone have any new business to discuss?
There was just one thing I wanted to follow. I don't know if it's new or old, but unfortunately, the last meeting I was at, I know there's been a couple since then, there was a conversation about services that were rendered to some of our next door neighbors in terms of surveying, and we were asking about where that was authorized and how that came about.
That was an elementary teacher who was the content specialist. He was outside marking a trail with orange tape.
So it was not a provider?
Nope.
No, we talked about it though.
And
You missed
I
the
should have
great
been, you're right. So sorry.
we looped the neighbor into the conversation about what happens next, so we're
Good,
good with that.
thank you. Yep, that's the best.
Okay. Audit committee meeting is attached. That's, I think, from the risk assessment. Policy adoption and review, we have none. Hearings and petitions, we have none. Upcoming activities, a spring recess is coming up. Starts next Friday, and through the following week. Our next BOE meeting is 4/27. We have no reason to go into execs. I need a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Hotailing, a second. Mr. Hislop, all in favor? Aye.